Okay, here we are. Daf Kuf Daled Amud Aleph. We're at Upneima Lomonu et Achaz. Okay, so we had a list in the Mishnah of the kings who do not have a share in the world to come. And the Gemara's question is: there were some other terrible kings who did some terrible stuff. So why are they not listed on the list of those that don't have Olam Haba? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, Mipnei Shemutar ben Shnei Tzadikim. Because Ahaz, as bad as he was in between two righteous men. Ben Yotam and Hiskiyahu. He was in between Yotam and Hiskiyahu, meaning Yotam was a Sadiq and was his father. Hiskiyahu was his son and was a Sadiq. So it's a sign that he was still part of the Jewish people, and therefore he has a Helik in Olam Haba. We have Yosef Amar. It says, you know why? Because he was embarrassed in front of Yeshayahu. Shneimar, Yomer Hashem Yeshayahu, Tena lekat Ahaz, Ata Oshareshu Benecha, El Ketet Ha'alata Benecha, Ha'al Yonah, El Mislat Tzedeh Choves. Hashem is sending Yeshayahu to go and speak to Ahaz, and he tells you know where you're going to find him? The road or the field of the Kovesh, of the launderer. Okay? Why would the king be by the laundry room? What does the king have to do with the laundry room? So my Kovesh, what's the meaning of the word Kovesh? So the Gemara answers, Achaz hid, kavash, his face, and he turned away. Kovesh interpreted as kovesh, which means to press or cover one's face. He was embarrassed of his sins, and he didn't want Yeshaya to see him. He took a washer's trough, right? He took a pot they used the washing for, and he turned it over his head, and he turned away. And this way, he didn't have to see him. Now, the Akedah Yitzchak explains, because Ahaz was embarrassed of his sins, and they were sins that were based on impulse and tava and taiva, desire, and they weren't like something that he did on purpose. And the Gemara tells us, in Masechah Berachot, the Gemara tells us that a person who is embarrassed of his sins, he gets a kapara. Okay, there's guess right. So you take a look at the end of note 13. Berachot 12b, in the merits of being embarrassed by one's sins, there's a kapara based on that. So now the Gemara's next question: why wasn't Ammon counted in those who do not get Olam Haba? Because of the honor of his son Yoshayahu. That's why Ammon wasn't on the list. Now again, that doesn't mean he wasn't on the list. Just mean we didn't list him, but he still doesn't get Olam Haba. Or does it mean he gets Olam Haba? Could be that the son can do zechutim, and he gets his father Ammon into Olam Haba. Menashe Nami. Menashe also should be not on the list. Lo Limnei shouldn't be counted because of the honor of his father Hiskiyahu. So why is Menashe listed? Although we said in the end Menashe did Shuman against Olam Haba, but why is he listed? You have the kavod of his father of Hiskiyahu. Gemara says very important statement. Bera mizakeh abba. A son can bring merit to his father. A son can do mitzvot, and he can bring merit to his father, right? As it shows that he's on the right path, and even though his father was a rasha, still it must be that his father did something right, and that's why he's doing something right now. That's why the son is doing something right. But Abba, a father cannot earn merit for a wicked son. Meaning, the way I understood it at least, was you can take a look at this whole note in 15. It's pretty long. Let's take a look at the note. Okay, let's read a little more in the Gemara, then we'll look at the note. Okay, let's look in the Gemara again. There's no rescue from my hand, and the Sifri explains as follows: Ein Abraham Asil Ishmael. Abraham cannot save his wicked son Ishmael from divine punishment. Similarly, Yitzchak cannot save Esav from divine punishment. Similarly, Hiskiyahu could not save Menashe. And Menashe is according listed in our Mishnah as having no portion in the world to come, even though later he did Olam Haba. He did Shuvah against Olam Haba. Now, take a look in Note 15. Rashba explains, since it is the parents who are the cause of a child's existence, they may be said to live on through their progeny. So they're living through their son. Because if the child performs righteous deeds, it means the parents too are performing them. The reverse, however, is not true. The existence of the parents is not due to the child. Thus, there's no way that the righteous deeds of the parents may be viewed as having been performed by the child. Right? The child doing it, that means the parents are doing it. But if the parents are doing it, doesn't mean the child is doing it. Therefore, it doesn't go that way. Okay, then the next one is, I think, the one we mentioned before. Child is molded by the instruction of its parents. The child of wicked parents would never grow up to be righteous if his parents had not instructed and encouraged, or at least permitted him to be righteous. Thus, the righteousness of the child is somewhat due to his parents, whose own righteousness reveals itself in the person of the child, even if it's not revealed itself in the parents themselves. This reason, parents whose children were righteous are not included in the same categories as thoroughly wicked persons listed on the Mishnah. Now, what happens about Zchut Avot? What we say is Zchut Avot, the forefathers. So how does that work? So the Rashba answers, Zchut applies only to reward in this world. As long as the son lives, he can be the beneficiary of the righteous deeds performed by his predecessors. Once he passes on, however, his rewards depend solely on his own merits, meaning that he gets to Shamayim, his father's chutim doesn't work. The father's chutim can work on this world, but not on the next world, according to the Rashba. Now, there is an interesting story. We all know that when David Melch's son Avshalom was killed, right? And David Melch was crying for him. And he said, Bini, 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 Bini. And he said it 8 times, took him out of Gehinnom, put him to Olam Haba, connected his head back, whatever the story was. Lamaisa, you see a father being able to be something for his son. So it could be that when the father is alive, right? So it's like maybe when the father's alive, there's a chutim, he could put his chut on his son. Through tefillah and other things, he can do it. Once the father passes away, the child can't grab the zechutim of his father once his father has passed away, unless he's keeping him alive. Like the Rashba says, he's living through him, right? So if he's like his father, and then his father's alive and he's alive, and the zechutim come back and forth. Right? There's a lot of talk about this, but this is just some ideas. But the main point here is that a son can always help his father out, whereas a father cannot always help his son out. Okay. Now, now that we learn like this, now we know why Ahaz wasn't put on the list, because he had a son, Hiskiah. So Hiskiah was a Sadiq, so therefore he gets all of my And why didn't they list Yehoiakim? He's a bad guy. Right? Now, even though he had one saving grace, is that he was bad, but the rest of the generation was good. He didn't force people to be bad. Now, but why is he on the list? It was written on the skull of Yoakim, this and still another. And he got a lot of punishment. Because of all this punishment, he was able to get into Olam Haba. What actually happened? Okay, so there was a story. The grandfather of Preda found a skull that was cast down at the gates of Jerusalem. Who was the grandfather of Preda? Oh, the rabbi just mentioned right before. Chia, the son of Avuyah. So he found a skull at the gate of Jerusalem. And it was written on it, this and still another. So he found the skull, kavara, he buried it, but it didn't stay buried. Kavara, he buried it again, and it didn't stay buried. Amar, he said, this is the skull of Yehoiakim, kevurat hamor, ikaver, saho, v'hashlech. He should be buried with the burial of a donkey. Now, the donkey doesn't get buried. The donkey's bones just stay there on the surface. So too over here. His skull is not being buried. He's being like a donkey. So Amar, he said to himself, Malka, who Yehoiakim is still a king. It's not right for his skull to be disrespected. So you can't bury him. So what I'm going to do? Keracha b'shara'eh ve'otva b'siftah. He wrapped the skull in the silk and placed it in his closet in his chest. Now, he leaves it there. His wife is doing some cleanup in the house. Hazete divithu. His wife saw the skull. Savra, she thought, this must be the skull of my husband's first wife, who he still can't forget. Therefore, he keeps her skull. She's not going to have this. She's his wife now. She fired up the oven and burned the skull. Now he understood this and one more. And then after all this distribution, he was destined to go into Olam Haba after all these problems. Okay. Okay. Tanya. It was taught in the Braita. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Bishvil v'atov be'enecha asiti. Hiskiah sinned and said, I have done that which was good in your eyes. Well, what is the sin over there? Is he's davening to stay alive, and he's saying it was an immodest statement, right? You don't want to speak of your own merits. You always daven that Hashem should give you without your own merits, right? You can't boast yourself. And one sin leads to another. Because now that his prayers were accepted, Kadosh Baruch Hu comes and tells him you're going to live 15 more years. And he says to Yeshaya, what's the sign? Ma'ot. What's the sign? Bishvil ma'ot, because he sinned with saying ma'ot. Nochrim achlu al shulchano. Eventually, the foreigners, the idolaters, the goyim came and ate at his table, right? Because when the whole sun stopped and everything, they wanted to know what happened, so they came to visit. When they came to visit, he was too nice to them, and he gave them to sit at the table. Garam galut levanav, and he caused, because of this, he caused descendants to go into exile in Babylon. This is what the Rav Chizkiah and Amora taught. The Amar Chizkiah, call him as Amen, over kochavim letoch beto, mushamish alav, orem kalut levanav. Whoever invites a worshiper of idols into his house and waits on him causes his descendants to go into exile. You bring goyim to your house and you serve them, you're giving them food and drink as a guest, you're causing your children to go to exile. And they were Sarisim in the palace of the king of Babylon. Who was this? Daniel, Mishael, Hananiah, Azariah. They were all descendants of Hiskiah, and they were all working in the palace of the Babylon. They got exiled, and they worked for Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, and then he continued his sin. וישמח עליהם חזקיה, וירם את בית נחותה, את הכסף, את הזהב, ואת הבשמים, ואת השמן הטוב. He then goes and shows them around, showing them silver, gold, spices, fragrant oil. Amarav, ma beit nachoto. What does it mean beit nachoto? Oy oy oy. Ishto, ishketa alehim. Hiskiah's own wife poured them drinks, which was not tzniut. It was not appropriate for her to come out and pour drinks. Should not have been displayed to them. Shmuel Amar, he showed them his treasure house, which shouldn't have been showed. He showed them weapons that destroy other weapons. He showed them the power of the might of their weaponry. And perhaps all this was making these goyim jealous, and they knew what they go after, and they knew they now wanted these stuff. So he didn't do well. Now, the Gemara, after discussing the things of the king of Yehuda, comments a little bit on the book of Eicha. Okay, so first of all, Eicha Yasheva Bedad. It says, how, alas, she sits in solitude. Amar Rava, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Laku Yisrael be'echa. Why, when talking about the destruction of the Jerusalem, does it start with the word Echa? Why? Echa B'Gematria is 36. Because they went against the 36 karet penalties, the 36 avirot that lead to karet penalty in the Torah. They did all of them. All the keritot, karet penalties, all the karet sins, that's what they did, all 36. Echa, Aleph, Yud is 11, Chav, Hey, it's 25, 21, 11, 36. That's where it starts with Echa. Tell you they did this 36 avirot that lead to karet. Amar Yohanan, Ifnai, Ma, Laku, Ba'alam Bet. Why were they punished with Aleph Bet? Chapters 1, 2, and 4. And are all starting with beginning with the word Echad, and they all written in the alphabet way. I believe chapter 3 is also written in alphabet, but it's 3 psukim of Aleph, 3 psukim of Bet, 3 psukim of Gimel, 3 psukim of Dalet. If I remember correctly, 1, 2, and 4 were written originally, and it was brought to the king, and the king threw it in the fire. And then later on, chapters 3 and 5 were added. Okay, even though 5 is added, it's not in the alphabet order, it is 22 psukim, connected the 22 otiot of the alphabet. So the whole thing is based on the alphabet. Why? Because they transgressed against the Torah. When they went every single thing in the Torah, they went against, and the Torah was given the alphabet, and they went completely against the alphabet. Yashiva bedan, the sitting alone. I told them in Sefer Devarim, V'yishkon Yisrael betach badan, en Yaakov, Eretz Dagam Tirosh Av Shamav Yaratfu Tal, that they should sit securely alone in a land of grain and wine, just like Yaakov. Even its heaven shall drip with dew. I told them to sit alone. Achshav Yeh badan moshuvam. Now their dwelling shall be alone. Hashem wanted the Jewish people to be alone in a splendid isolation, free of outside influences. But because Israel was what's it called, doing sins, and they wanted to be like the Goyim. So what did Hashem do? Hashem made them alone by making the Goyim despise them. That's what Hashem did. So we're supposed to be alone. That's probably what was going on here with Hiskiah before. Why is he showing everything? We have to be proud as Jews, and you don't have to show off the Goyim and try to make them like us and stuff like that. We have to, be proud of ourselves. The city that was great with people. They would marry a young girl to an adult man, and an adult woman to a young man. So this way, they may have many children. Note 34, they used to marry off young teenagers to older spouses. This was done to promote a higher birth rate. For extreme youth was viewed as a biological impediment to the capacity of procreation. But both spouses were very young, this impediment would be aggravated. If one spouse was older, on the other hand, it would help with this impediment. Basically, I don't think they married a 6-year-old woman to a 15-year-old boy, but they wouldn't marry off let's say, 17, 18-year-old boy to a girl who's 22. Right? They're ready to have birth. They're ready to give, stuff like that. This way, things happen quicker and faster. Okay. Yeah, that's maybe a shidduch solution for the shidduch crisis. Is you don't have to always marry younger. Younger can marry older, and older can marry younger. Both ways. She has become like a widow. She's like a widow, but not an actual widow. Just like if a man goes across the sea and he's doing a lot of business there and he's staying there a long time, she's like a widow. So too, Jerusalem is not permanently estranged from Hashem. Hashem will come back. Right now, we just like an almanah. He went away for a little bit. The greatest among the nations, the princes among provinces. Wherever they go, they become princes of their masters, prize for their intellect. There were 2 Jews that were captured on Mount Carmel. And their captor was walking behind them. These 2 Jews that were captured, they were talking to themselves, and they said, one, that this camel that's walking in front of us is blind in one eye, and has 2 flasks, one is with wine, one was with oil. Two people are leading them. Had Yisrael, one is a Jew, one is a guy. Amalahem Shabbai. Am Orif. Said the captain to them, you stiff-necked people, we're bringing you down, and you're still talking as if you know stuff. You're in this wretched state, and you still think you're wise. How could you know such things? Where do you know such things? Amarullah. They said to him, I'll tell you. This camel is half blind, one eye, because the eye that he could see, he eats the grass, and the other eye on the other side of him, he doesn't see, therefore he doesn't eat it. Therefore, it's all you can see the path in front of him. He hasn't been eating that grass on that side where he is blind. How we know he has two flasks, one with wine, one with oil. Wine drips on the ground and it gets swallowed into the ground. Where oil drips and floats on the top of the surface. So we see on two sides, there's some liquid that is falling into the ground, some that is staying on the top. And two people are leading them. One is a guy and one is a Jew. How we know this? We see that the guy is relieving himself on the road. Then we see and we see a Jew relieving himself on the side. So two of them. One has modesty and one is not. So that's how we know one's a guy, one's a Jew. So Radafa Harehim, Umatzachid Verehem. He runs in front of them and he sees it is true. But he kisses them, brings to his and kisses them on their head, and he brings them to the house. And he makes for them a big seudah. Now, the Gemara here just continues that he danced in front of them and stuff like that. We're going to read it soon, but I want to add what's brought down in note number 4 is the version of Rashi, where there's a little bit more of the story. Okay, and they come to the house, and they look at their captor, and they say to him, "You look like the king's cupbearer. You look like the king's cupbearer." So he says, "What do you mean?" They go and speak to your mother. So he goes to his mother. He says, "What does this mean? I look like the king's cupbearer." So read number 4, and she said, "It's true. The father you thought was your father wasn't really your father. Rather, your father was the king's cupbearer." So what's it called? He then brings them some meat, and they say this meat has the taste of dog. Goes to his mother, says, "What's the story here?" He says to him, "True, it's lamb meat, but the mother died, and we had it nursed by the dog. Therefore, maybe that's why he tastes the dog in there." He gave wine. He tastes the wine. They said it tastes like corpse. He goes and says, "What's this?" He says, "Yeah. The truth is that this vineyard is over your father's grave." So then he stands up, kisses them on the heads, and says to them, right? And he said, "Baruch shebecha b'zaro shel Abraham, v'natan lehem b'chokhmato, u'chol makom she'enu olchin, na'asin tzarim la'adonehem, u'pataran, v'alchu b'tehem l'shalom." And they return to their home in peace. So we see, even though we are exiled, we somehow still become princes in the exile. Somehow we become princes in the exile. But okay, so we did that already. Okay, now the Eicha continues. Why did it say two crying? Why at night? Because of the night. Everyone was crying that night when the spies came back. It was the ninth of Av. You cry for no reason. I'll give you a reason to cry for all generations. The temple and all the other bad things that happen somehow always start on Tisha B'Av. Another explanation, B'Laila. Whoever cries at night, his crying is heard. Because during the day, with all the hustle and bustle of the day, it's hard to hear the crying. But at night, it actually is more conducive to crying. And when it cries at night, it looks like the stars and the constellations and everything is weeping along with him. They're moved by his plight. Whether it is that these bodies of heaven actually have emotions and they're able to also cry with him, or it's just more conducive again to crying at night. Anyone who cries at night, whoever hears him, will also cry along with him because again it's conducive to crying. Story of one woman. Shechinto shel Rabbi Gamliel. She was the neighbor of Rabbi Gamliel. Shemet Bana, her son died. She would weep for him at night. Rabbi Gamliel heard her voice and cried with her. Till his eyelashes fell out. Note 11, Rabbi Gamliel was reminded by her tears of the destruction of the temple, and he was crying not just for her loss, but for the loss of the temple, and to say that every single day from the destruction of the temple, the curse gets worse and worse. All the problems come from there, and therefore he cried until his eyelashes fell out. The next day, students noticed this facial change, and they removed her from the neighborhood. They relocated her this way. Rabbi Gamliel will not have to go through so much distress. And her tears are on her cheeks. Like a woman who cries over the death of her husband of her youth. Her tears are constant because she can't stop crying. Okay, a pasuk in Yoel, I believe. Yes. Fine. The prosecutors have become leaders. The pasuk says in Echad. Amar Rava Yohanan, Kol Mitzvah Israel Naaseh Rosh. Whoever is mean to the Jews, he becomes a leader. Right? Haman, Hitler, Yimach Shemam, they always end up coming from nothing, becoming something because they hate the Jewish people. And there's reasons for it. You don't want to be captured by a nobody. It has to be somebody. It's more respectful that way. Also, make people do tshuva. They see he's becoming so powerful. This guy who hates the Jews. שנאמר כי לא מואב לאשר מושג לה כעת הראשון, קל ארצה הזבולין וארצה נפתלי והאחרון הכביד דרך הים עבר הירדן גליל היום, הגויים. For there is no weariness, they don't get tired to the one who oppresses her. Like the first time, dealt mildly, exiling only land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but the last time he will deal harshly. In all three stages he will be exiled. In turn, those who live the way of the sea on the other side of the Jordan, Amar Rava, Amar Yohanan, what does it say? Kol Mesig Israel Enu Ayef. Lo Mu'af, you will not get tired. The enemies of Israel somehow have this supernormal power to keep going, even though other people will become tired. And again, the Marasha says it's done so the Jews will see that so much things are happening that they'll want to do tshuva. They'll realize it's supernatural, and they realize coming from Hashem, and they have to do tshuva. Lo alechem kol derech. May not befall you all who pass by the road, says Echa. Shouldn't happen to you the way it happened to the Jewish people. Here we see kuvlana is from the Torah. So what is kuvlana? Two opinions. Look at note 18. Kuvlana means when you say something to someone about what happened, you say, oh, it shouldn't happen to you. It's not a superstition only, but it's something that is from the Torah. You say it should never happen to you. Lo aleichem. Kuvlana also could mean telling somebody about the misfortune. And this way they can pray for him. Right? So it's also a Jewish thing that if someone's in a problem, look and see if there is a pain like my pain. Okay, so you could make people look at it so they'll daven and they'll feel moved to do something. Okay. Kol over derech, amarav amram, amarav, asuni kovrei aldat. They made me like transgressors of the law. Dilu b'stom ketiv, v'Hashem himtil al Sedom. Says, and Hashem rained down upon Sedom. The destruction of Jerusalem, it says from on high, he sent a fire in my bones and crushed them. So Jerusalem is saying, I was punished through fire just like Sodom. the iniquity of the sins of the daughter of my people of Yerushalayim was greater than the sin of Sodom. If that is true, so if Jerusalem was more wicked, why was Jerusalem not completely destroyed as Sodom was? There was one Midah Yerushalayim had that Sodom didn't have. They would not help. They would not help others. They wouldn't help the poor. They wouldn't help the needy. They wouldn't support. So the hand of the compassionate woman would boil their own children. Now, what does it mean? So different opinions. Rashi says when eating their meal on the flesh of their children, they still had some compassion, nature, and invited their starving neighbors to partake. Others want to explain it a little bit less tragic like that. That they would give off the little food that they had to their neighbors when they were going through a tragedy, rather than keeping the food for themselves. In this way, now they were boiling the children, so to speak, by not giving them food. But they still had compassion, whereas Sodom never had any compassion. They did not share any of it, and therefore they were completely destroyed. Whereas Jerusalem, even had worse sins, were not completely destroyed. The Lord has trampled all the mighty ones in the midst. The coin has become worthless. All the mighty people of Jerusalem could not stand up to the army. They jeered at you. Why in the book of Echam we already saw that that in the book of Echam it goes through Aleph Bet, but if you pay attention, the pay is before the ayin. Why is it pay before the ayin? If everything's going to Aleph Bet, it should be ayin and then pay. Hikdim pay la'ayin. Because of Meraglim. Shamru b'fihem mashlu b'einehim. They spoke with their mouth before they before what they saw with their eyes. Now, really, they reported what they saw. So, what do you mean they spoke before they saw? Is that they perceived, they saw what they wanted to see, and because they spoke about it. Oh, we don't want to go there. This and that. I mean, the whole plan. So everything they saw in a bad way. So therefore, they really spoke before they actually saw what was really happening. Okay. Ochlu ami, achlu lechem Hashem lo karau. They who devour my people devour bread. They who call not upon Hashem. Amar Rava Amar Yochanan. Kol ochel min lachman sheYisrael toim ta'am lechem. And ochel min lachman Yisrael and toim ta'am lechem. Okay. Anyone who eats the Jewish bread, he enjoys the bread. But if he doesn't, and then he doesn't enjoy it. Let's take a look at note 32. The Goyim take pleasure in robbing Jews. And Jews robbing from a Jew tastes better than robbing from their Goyim. Persecutors are granted by God a special joy of the bread they steal, so that they will continue to do it so with enthusiasm, thus punishing the Jews for the sins and leading the Jews to do tshuva. Okay, or Hashem lo karel, they who call not upon Hashem. Rav Amar El these are the corrupt Jewish judges. Ushmuel Amar El they teach the young children who do not perform the work honestly. It is due to such persons the bread of Jewish people is devoured by their foes. When you have dishonest judges, you have not good teachers, this leads to the Goyim coming and stealing from the Jewish people. Okay, now, the Gemara's question now is, Mi Minan. Who counted them? Who made the list of which kings don't have Olam Haba? Where did this list come from? It was the Anshe Chenes HaGedolah that put them on the list. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean that Anshe Chenes HaGedolah, they declared who gets Olam Haba, who doesn't get Olam Haba? I thought it was from Hashem. Does it mean that they just knew? And they knew who it was? Okay, so let's see the next Gemara. Seems to me they wanted to add one more person on the list. Who they wanted to add? They wanted to add Shlomo HaMelech. Now, why do you want to add Shlomo HaMelech? Take a look at note 35. So in Melachim, it tells us at the time of Shlomo's old age, his wife turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not complete with Hashem. And Shlomo HaMelech went after Ashtores, the god of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abominations of Ammonites. And Solomon did that which was bad in the eyes of Hashem. Now, the Gemara Shabbat says it wasn't actually him, but he did not stop his wife from doing it. So therefore, he is being faulted for it. So because of that, they wanted to say he's not going to get Olam Haba. So as they were planning to put Solomon on the list of not getting Olam Haba, seems to be that Anshe Kasagos is deciding who gets Olam Haba or not. David Melech came and was bowing down in front of them and asking them not to put Shlomo Melech on that list. But they didn't pay attention. A fire came down and started licking their benches where they were sitting. They would not pay attention. Do you see a man diligent at work? He should stand before the kings. He should not stand before the dark ones. He went ahead and built the Beit HaMikdash before mine. He made sure that the Beit HaMikdash would be built as soon as possible. He didn't waste time with it, play with the workers or whatever it is. His house, which he wanted to move into, took him 13 years. Took too long. He should be in the company of righteous kings and not with the wicked kings. Batko came and said this. They still didn't listen. How many boys came and said, is it for you the punishment is meted out? Do you despise him? Shall you choose and not I? Meaning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you think you're in charge of who goes to Olam Haba, who doesn't? It's not your choice. It's not your choice. It's Hashem's choice. Who goes and who doesn't. Okay? Lo b'shamayim he, usually we say Lo b'shamayim he, right? But that comes to Psak Halacha. Comes to this, Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba, Gan Eden, who's getting, this is already all God's dominion. Therefore, you can't decide. Okay? Now we're going to come, one last Gemara for this week. Yosheh Reshimot, Hayu Omrim. The interpreters of verses used to say as follows. Kulan ba'in olam haba. Nope. All these people that are mentioned in the Mishnah, they all get olam haba. Shneimar li Gilad. Shemi is Gilad. B'li Menashe Ephraim. Ozoshi. Yehuda, Mechoki, Moab, Sir, Rachti, Aledom, Ashlich, Na'ali, Alai, Peleshet, Hitroai. Everything is mine. Kadosh Baruch Hu says they're all coming to olam haba. Li Gilad, Zahab. Hab's coming. What is Gilad to do with Ahab? Shanafa, because he died, Beramot Gilad. So it says Li Gilad. That means he's mine. He's going to Olam Haba. Menashe Kemashmo. Menashe is Menashe. Menashe did Tshuva, but he also gets Olam Haba. Ephraim Ma'oz Roshi, Zayiravam. When it says Ephraim Ma'oz Roshi, Ephraim my stronghold, that's Yeravam ben Nebat. He was on the list. No, he's also getting the Ka'atim Ephraim. Yehuda Mechoki. He's Achitofel. You said Achitofel is not going to get. Achitofel also is going to get Olam Haba. Ka'atim Yehuda. Moab Sirachzi, Ze Gehazi. This is Gehazi. He got punished because of the Naaman going into the water and coming out and says, I'll pay you. He took payment. He's not supposed to. The Philistine will make overtures to me. This is the Doeg Adami, right? So Amar, okay, Allah Peleshet Roy. Amar Malchei Hashem Lefnei Kadosh Baruch Hu. Ribono Shel Olam. Im Yavo David Sharag et Pelishtim. Horish et Banecha Gat, and he got the city of Gat. And he comes and says, why are you allowing my enemies, Doeg and Achitophel, to come into the world to come? What are we going to do for him? What are you going to tell him? I'm going to So Hashem's going to say, my job to make them friends. It's my job to make them Ra'im, friends with each other. It's a covenant upon me to make the conqueror of Philistines friends with Doeg and Ahitophel. And Yaakov says, that's Hashem's job. Oseh shalom b'dromav. He makes peace in the heavens. Okay. So here in the Art Scroll, in the end of note 5, the last paragraph, the view of the interpreters of verses, the Rosh Hashemot, is given as a separate opinion to the Mishnah. And the accepted view is the Mishnah. And before we end, I remember seeing something from the Ben Yoda. I just want to see if I can find it Right now, let me just see. Okay. But anyway, other rights. And the men of the Great Assembly at the time of Mishnah too knew the expanded meaning of the verse into Tehillim, indicating all Jewish people in the list had a share in the world to come. The list of the Jewish people was meant to teach only that the degree of wickedness exhibited in them was such that they should by rights have no share. But in reality, the various recreations of the soul, their sins would be taken away, and they would have a share in the world to come. Moreover, the humiliation of being included in the list of the wicked would itself gain measure of atonement for their souls. That's why the men of the Great Assembly compiled that list in order to give them a tikkun. Okay? The According to Ben Yada, it's not a dissenting opinion, rather, it is the same opinion that we put them on there especially so that they can get embarrassed and get tshuva and get a tikkun, and they can come into the world to come. That's the Ben Yada. That's the Ben Ishchai. Okay, fine. Different opinions of how you understand that. And that is the Gemara for today. Tודה רבה.